I found it on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't looking for anything, really. I was just standing in my office, the one I'd finally earned after 4 years of arriving before everyone else and leaving after the cleaning crew. And I was going through the last drawer of my desk before the move. That was the plan. Clean out. Pack up. Start over somewhere else. And there it was. A small silver hair clip. The kind with a tiny clasp that makes a soft click when it closes. She used to wear it pushed to one side, holding back the piece of hair that always escaped her bun by mid-afternoon, no matter how carefully she'd pinned it in the morning. I don't know why I picked it up. I don't know why I stood there for a full 2 minutes holding something the size of my thumbnail like it was made of glass. I just knew that the moment my fingers closed around it, I stopped breathing the way you stop breathing when something you thought you'd buried decides to come back up. Her name was Vera. And everything I'm about to tell you happened in the 6 months between the day she walked into my office and the day I sat alone in a parking garage and cried for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to drive home. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. I need you to understand what my life looked like before Vera, because otherwise none of this makes sense. I was 36 years old. I was the CEO of a mid-size marketing firm in Chicago. 63 employees, 2 floors, a corner office with a view I had stopped seeing years ago because I walked past it too many times to notice it anymore. I wore blazers in shades of navy and charcoal, and occasionally a dark burgundy that my assistant, Priya, called my ambitious color. I had a routine: gym at 6, office by 8, lunch at my desk, usually a salad I'd eat while answering emails I should have answered the night before, evening calls with the West Coast team, home by 9, sometimes 10, glass of wine, lights out. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about that. I was not unhappy in the way that makes people do dramatic things. I was unhappy in the quieter way, the way that feels like wearing shoes that are almost the right size. You don't notice it until the end of the day, and by then you're just glad to take them off. Vera came in on a Monday in February. She wasn't hired to work with me. She was brought in by HR as part of a corporate wellness initiative, the kind of thing companies do when the employee satisfaction survey comes back with a few too many responses in the stressed and burned out categories, which ours did. Which, if I'm honest, I had something to do with. She was a workplace therapist. That's what her badge said. Workplace wellness consultant. She had an office on the 4th floor, 2 doors down from the conference room, and she was supposed to meet with employees on a voluntary basis. It was not voluntary for me. My board made that very clear. Genevieve. That was how my chair, Sandra, had opened the conversation. Not with a question, just my name, said in the particular tone that Sandra used when she had already decided something and was giving me the courtesy of appearing to involve me in the process. We think it would be good for the company if leadership demonstrated engagement with the wellness program. You want me to see the therapist. I want you to model healthy behavior for your team. Same thing, Sandra. So, on a Wednesday afternoon in the 3rd week of February, I knocked on the door of the 4th floor office and met Vera Collins for the first time. She was younger than I expected. Late 20s, maybe 30. She had dark hair pulled back. That was where the clip came in, I realize now, though I didn't notice it that first day. She was wearing a soft gray sweater and reading something on a tablet. And when I knocked, she looked up and smiled the kind of smile that doesn't calculate anything. Just open. Just there. Genevieve? That's me. Come in. I've been looking forward to meeting you. I almost said something sharp. I almost said, no, you haven't. You've been looking forward to meeting the CEO, and that's a different thing. But something about the way she said it made me think she might actually mean it, and that was strange enough to make me sit down instead. The session was 50 minutes. I spent the first 20 explaining why I didn't need to be there. She listened without interrupting, without writing anything down, without doing that thing therapists do on television where they tilt their head and say, in a way that makes you want to scream. She just listened. At the 40-minute mark, she said, "Can I ask you something? That's generally how this works. When was the last time you enjoyed a full day? Not a productive day, not a successful day. A day where you felt present, easy, glad to be exactly where you were." I opened my mouth. I closed it again. I sat there for a moment that lasted much longer than it should have, staring at the window behind her shoulder. And I could not, for the life of me, come up with an answer. "That's what I thought," she said. Not unkindly, just gently, like she was naming something I already knew, but hadn't looked at directly. I booked the next appointment before I left the building. I told myself it was because Sandra was watching. I went back every Wednesday. And then, because Vera suggested it might be useful to have more consistency, I started going on Mondays too. I told Priya to block the time as strategic planning. I'm not proud of that. The thing about Vera was that she didn't try to fix me. That was the first surprise. Every other professional relationship in my life was transactional in a very specific way. You bring a problem, they bring a solution, money changes hands, everyone leaves satisfied. That was how I understood being helped. That was how I understood most things. Vera wasn't interested in solutions. She was interested in questions. And not the uncomfortable kind that therapists are supposed to ask. Not "tell me about your childhood," or "when did you first feel this way?" She asked things like, "What are you most afraid of admitting to yourself right now?" If the company disappeared tomorrow, who would Genevieve be? What does it feel like in your body when you're genuinely at peace? Do you remember? I hated those questions. I answered all of them. By March, I had started doing something I hadn't done in years, taking the long way home. Not for exercise, just to walk. Just to be outside my own head for 20 minutes in a way that the gym, with its metrics and its targets, had never actually given me. I noticed things on those walks. A bakery on Wabash that I had apparently walked past 100 times without registering. The way the L sounds different at dusk than it does in the morning rush. The specific texture of late winter Chicago air. Cold but not sharp, like it was tired of being cold and almost ready to give up. I noticed things at work too. Small things. The way Priya always brought me coffee before I asked for it, and never once received a thank you that wasn't attached to a task. The way the team in the creative department had started eating lunch at their desks again, which always happened when something was wrong and I was too busy to notice. I started noticing, in other words. And I wasn't sure if that was therapy working, or if it was something else. Something else. As in, the fact that I had started looking forward to Wednesdays in a way I looked forward to very little else in my week. Something else. As in, the fact that on the Monday she had to cancel because of a scheduling conflict. I rearranged my afternoon 3 times trying to find a pocket of time I could claim for myself. And when I couldn't, I sat in my office with a low-level restlessness I couldn't name. I told myself, she's good at her job. That's all this is. You're responding to competence. You respect competence. You've always respected competence. That was reasonable. That was fine. That was what I kept telling myself on the afternoon in late March, when she reached across the space between our chairs to hand me a box of tissues, because I had apparently started crying without noticing, which had never happened to me before in a professional setting. And her fingers brushed my knuckles. It was nothing. Less than a second. She pulled back immediately, the way you do when you're a professional and you're aware of the line. But I felt it for the rest of the day. Not on my skin, exactly. More like a warmth that started there and spread somewhere I didn't know to look. I went home that night and stood in my kitchen for a long time, not making the dinner I had intended to make, not pouring the glass of wine I always poured, just standing there, thinking about her hands, thinking about the way she'd said, earlier in the session, I think you're someone who learned very young that being needed was safer than being known. And how the sentence had landed in me like something falling into place that I hadn't realized was out of place. I poured the wine eventually. I drank it too fast. I did not think about her hands, I told myself. I thought about her hands. April is when things get complicated. I know that now, looking back. At the time, I just thought April was when I started sleeping badly. I would wake at 2, 3 in the morning with a mind that refused to quiet down, and I would lie there in my very expensive apartment with its very clean lines and its very careful art, and I would think about things I could not organize into the kind of clean column I was used to maintaining. I thought about the session where she had asked me what I was most proud of, and I had given her the company, the board presentations, the profile in Crane's Chicago business, and she had listened to all of it, and then said very quietly, "Those are achievements, Genevieve. I asked what you were proud of." And the distinction had broken something open in me that I was still trying to put back together. I thought about the way she laughed when I said something she genuinely found funny. Not the polished, professional laugh that people in my world used as social currency, but a real one, surprised out of her, like she hadn't planned to find me funny and was a little delighted that she had. I thought about the afternoon she told me in passing that she took a pottery class on Thursday evenings. Not because the story was interesting, because I immediately, involuntarily, wanted to know if she was good at it. Wanted to know what her hands looked like covered in clay. Wanted to know what she looked like doing something for herself, outside the careful professional frame of our sessions. And I caught myself wanting that, and felt something cold move through my chest that was not discomfort. It was recognition. That was the thing I couldn't say out loud to anyone, especially not to her, because she was the workplace therapist, and I was the CEO. And there are approximately 15 reasons why what I was starting to feel was not only inappropriate, but structurally impossible. And I knew all 15 of them by name. I also knew that knowing them wasn't making them work. I tried logistics. That's what I do when something doesn't fit. I restructure around it. I started scheduling calls during my Monday slot. Real calls I couldn't reschedule, so I would have to shorten the session. If I spent less time with her, I would stop looking forward to it so much. If I stopped looking forward to it, the whole feeling would metabolize into something manageable. The first Monday I cut short, I walked back to my office and could not focus for 2 hours. The second, I sat through a budget meeting thinking about the fact that she had mentioned weeks ago that she grew up in Michigan, and I had spent approximately 45 minutes on a Saturday wondering which part and why it felt like a piece of information I needed to keep close to me. The third Monday, I didn't shorten. I sat in her office for the full 50 minutes and told her, because apparently this was what we were doing now, about the years I'd spent making myself useful to people who mistook my usefulness for personality, and she listened the way she always listened, like I was the only person in the world who was speaking, like the silence she held between my sentences was specifically shaped for what I was about to say next. And at the end of the session, I stood up to go, and she stood up too to walk me to the door. She always did that, some small professional courtesy. And for a moment we were just standing very close in a small office, and she looked at me and said, "You know what strikes me about you?" And something in my chest went very still. "You talk about everyone else's needs so fluently," she said. "I've never once heard you talk about what you actually want." She wasn't flirting. I know that. I know what flirting looks like, and that was not it. That was her doing her job, with the kind of accuracy that sometimes hurts more than anything careless. But I looked at her in that moment. Really looked, the way I had been carefully not doing for weeks. And I thought, I know exactly what I want. And I didn't say it. I said, "That's an interesting observation. Same time Thursday." She said yes. I left. I stood in the elevator and watched the floor numbers climb and thought, this is going to cost you something. Whatever direction you go from here, this is going to cost you something, I was right. I just didn't know yet how much. But before we go any further, if you made it here, then you already know this feeling. That specific weight of wanting something you know you can't, or shouldn't, reach for. The way we sometimes build a whole architecture of reasons around the one thing we're trying not to admit. If this story is finding you where you live, hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell notification. That way YouTube tells you the moment a new story drops here on the channel. Now I want to ask you something in the comments. Have you ever had someone see you, really see you, in a way that scared you more than it comforted you? Someone who named something in you before you were ready to name it yourself? Tell me. I read every single comment. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll mark you with a heart. Now, back to Genevieve. It was a Thursday in May, and it was the last session we would have before the quarterly review I had been preparing for since February. I wasn't in a good place. I had been sleeping in fragments, eating erratically, running the numbers on the Q2 projections at midnight, and finding nothing that felt steady. The review mattered. I had been in rooms like that before and come out intact, but this one felt different. Maybe because I was different, which was also Vera's fault, though not in any way I could explain in a quarterly report. I sat down in the chair across from her, and she looked at me for one moment before saying very simply, "You're not okay." "I'm fine, Genevieve." I said I'm fine. She didn't push. She let me run through the surface layer, the review, the projections, the board's expectations, the way Sandra had been CCing people on emails in a way that felt like preparation for something. I said all of it. She listened. And then, when I ran out of words, she said, "What are you most afraid of right now? Not at work. Right now. In this room." I looked at her. I had a perfectly good professional answer prepared. I had been carrying it around for weeks like a card I could produce if anyone asked. And I opened my mouth, and the professional answer did not come out. What came out was, "I don't know how to do this anymore." She waited. "I don't know how to be in this room and be professional about it," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that, in a distant way. "I don't know how to sit across from you once a week and feel what I feel and then go back to my office and pretend that what happens here is just therapeutic, in the clinical sense." The room was very quiet. "I'm not telling you this because I expect anything from you," I said. "I'm telling you because I have spent my entire adult life not saying things out loud, and it has cost me more than I can calculate, and you are literally the person who taught me that. So I'm saying it. I'm saying it once. And then, I'm going to need us to figure out together what the professional version of moving forward looks like." Vera was quiet for a moment that I could not read at all. Then she said, "How long have you been carrying that?" "Since March." She exhaled slowly, not with surprise. More like someone who had been waiting for a door to open that they hadn't been able to open themselves. "Genevieve," she said. And then she stopped. She looked out the window for a moment, just a moment, and when she looked back, her expression was something I had never seen on her before. Not the warm professional, not the attentive listener. Something underneath both of those, unguarded, honest. "I need you to know," she said, "that what you just said means more to me than you probably understand. And I also need you to know that I can't, that there's a reason I can't." "I know," I said. "The ethical framework alone." "I know. I did. I had looked it up. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just needed you to know." She nodded slowly. There was a long silence. Outside the window, Chicago moved around us the way Chicago always moves. Indifferent, enormous, unhelpful. "What do you want to do?" she finally asked. I want to stop seeing you professionally, I said. Because I think that's the only honest version of this. I can't keep coming here, and I need to stop coming here. She looked at me. Her hands were folded in her lap. Still. Okay, she said. Just that. Okay. In the specific voice of someone who is agreeing to something that costs them something. I didn't let myself think too long about what that meant. I stood up. I collected my things. At the door, I stopped. Thank you, I said. For everything you did here. I mean that. She smiled. The real one. The surprised one. You did the work, she said. I just held the space. I walked out into the corridor. I pressed the elevator button. I stood there until the doors opened, and then I stepped in, and then the doors closed, and then I sat down on the floor of the elevator, the floor, like a person who had entirely lost her composure. And I put my face in my hands, and I stayed there until the floor stopped. I did not see Vera again after that Thursday. I canceled the following appointment through Priya, who asked no questions, which was why I loved Priya. I sent a formal note to HR indicating that I was stepping back from the wellness program to focus on Q2, which was true enough to write without feeling like a lie. I went into the quarterly review. I held my ground. The board asked the things boards ask, and I answered them. And Sandra looked at me across the table with something in her expression that I had previously read as calculation, and now wondered if it was simply exhaustion wearing a blazer. We were not so different, Sandra and me. I had never noticed that before. I left the board meeting and went home and slept for 10 hours, which I could not have done in February. That was something. That was Vera, in a way. 3 weeks later, I was walking past the 4th floor, actually walking past it, on my way to the conference room, not stopping, not slowing down, when I saw her through the glass wall of the small office, talking with someone from the creative team, leaning slightly forward the way she did when she was paying full attention. The piece of hair had escaped her bun. The clip was holding back what it could. I kept walking. I didn't slow down. But for the rest of that afternoon, I noticed things. The way light came through the east-facing windows at 4 o'clock and made everything look briefly gold. The sound of Priya laughing at something across the open floor, her real laugh, the one that was too loud and not polished and entirely her. The smell of coffee from the kitchen down the hall, someone's afternoon ritual. I had not noticed any of that before February. I noticed all of it now. That was the part that was hardest to explain to anyone. Had I been inclined to explain it, I hadn't lost something. That wasn't quite right. It was more that I had been shown a different kind of vision, the kind that notices what's actually in the room instead of only what's useful in the room. And I couldn't unsee it now. Whatever else Vera had done to me, she had done that. The last thing I heard about her was from Priya, who mentioned in passing one morning in June that the wellness consultant's contract was wrapping up at the end of the month. Corporate decision. Budget consolidation. The program had run its pilot period. I said, "Okay, noted," and looked back at my computer. Priya said, "She asked me to give you something." And she set a small folded note on my desk, the old-fashioned kind, on paper, handwritten. I waited until Priya left to open it. It said in handwriting that was smaller than I expected, like she had tried to keep it contained. "You came in wearing your armor like it was a second skin. You're leaving with it in your hands, and that's the difference. I hope you keep putting it down." That was all. I read it twice. I folded it back. I held it for a moment, the paper soft in a way that expensive paper gets when someone has handled it before giving it away. I thought about everything I could have said and hadn't. The evenings I had walked home thinking about pottery classes in Michigan and the sound of a laugh that surprised itself. The floor of the elevator. The silver clip. I thought about how sometimes the most important relationship in your life is the one that teaches you how to be in a relationship at all. The one that shows you what it costs to stay hidden, and what it might cost, less surprisingly, to stop. I put the note in my desk drawer. I turned back to my computer. Outside the window, Chicago kept going. The lake caught the morning light the way it always had, the way it would long after I was gone. I had never really looked at it before. This view I had earned, this window I had passed by 1,000 times without stopping. I stopped now. That was the thing about Vera. She didn't save me. She didn't come into my life and rearrange it into something easier or more beautiful or more legible from the outside. She just stayed present long enough for me to figure out that I was the one I had been most efficiently hiding from. The goodbye was real. The loss was real. And something else was real too. The way I walked differently after. Slower. A little more like someone who was actually inhabiting the body she'd been given. That kind of love doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It becomes the part of you that finally knows how to sit still in a good moment instead of moving on to the next task. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something here, type "Sodad" in the comments. That's how I'll know you made it to the end with me. And if you want to keep going, the next story is right there on your screen. I think you'll feel it too. Take care of yourself out there. Really. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.